Hi, Amy. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi.
Fantastic. Hi, it's Eric. Nice to see
Hi.
you.
Nice to see you.
I'm here with Karthik.
Hi, I'm very big behind you guys, I see.
That's all right. Another round of applause for Karthik and Amy, please. Thank you so much. So I'm going to start us off with a question. And Amy, I'm going to start with a question for you on Zoom there. And I'm going to ask, whose work is this? And I'm going to ask that, like, yes, sort of as a provocation regarding authorship, uh, but mostly in terms of how uh, it seems that material processes here are at play that trace social relations, and maybe emerge from those social relations, whether it's the quilting process itself, your 16 millimeter film work, your or what's it, 16? I think it was 16. Yes, it was 16 gauges. Just guessing gauges. And how those trace and emerge from social relations that you are then documenting. And there's obviously labor in the film, and there's labor of the film. And I'm curious at how those play with each other.
Yeah. Well, thank you and for prompting that first question, and thank you for having me here, and nice to, meet you all. Sorry I can't be here. I just had a baby shower this afternoon. I'm 31 weeks pregnant, so if I'm tired at all, it's because of that experience with our whole family today. But so I'm zooming in from California, where I live, and where I made the film alongside of the quilters who you saw. And so, yeah, I think that question of whose film, especially, I mean, I feel like we need to ask that question whenever we make a film with other people, but certainly when the work is kind of co-created with these other artists, these quilters who I was working with. I mean, to me, I think it does feel very mutual and collaborative in how I'm sort of learning and understanding what the sort of social space is of the quilting communities here in the Bay Area, and the sort of practice and methods that quilters use. And I was really trying to kind of think alongside of how quilts are made from these multiple different parts, and the sort of processes behind producing something from ideation to sort of collective making, into this film. And some small part of that is also that this film was made in a collective space that I am a part of, called Black Hole Cinema Collective here in the Bay. And though, that wasn't, I hand processed all of the film myself, that space is very much a collective and collaborative space in which we're learning, these analog techniques of how do we still keep like 16 or these analog practices still alive. And that's still very much like, or here in the Bay, that's very much because it's the community that helps like support and sustain and keeps that practice going, through our own kind of mutual aid and support of this small darkroom space that we all collectively help maintain. And I think that's very much also in line with quilting. I think it's very much has historically been a community practice. Quilting bees, quilting guilds, informal, just people gathering in each other's homes and making quilts. And I'm also working on a feature film called Grandmother's Garden that's about women quilting in U.S. history, and that was sort of impetus for making the Bay Area Sampler Quilt. But I don't know if I'm answering all of your questions, but at least hopefully, giving the audience and you some ideas of like how I was thinking through. I think in the spectrum of sort of like truly collaborative work, I think Bay Area was not as like collaborative as I've done in some of my other projects, which is really kind of engaging in these like more performative aspects with the people who are participating in my films, such as Grandmother's Garden, I think I would categorize that as a little bit more co-created with the people, but I think certainly the year plus time I spent going to these groups was how I kind of, I never start a project with it has to look like this or it's going to be a certain way. It's really created from the time I spend listening to people and spending time. I'm also getting into quilting. I'm having a baby and trying to make a quilt. So it's very much trying to like be alongside of these people that the projects kind of emerge.
Thank you, Amy. You absolutely answered the question.
Great.
And Karthik, the question I had for you was, where are you really from? No, I'm joking. I do have the same question for you. Whose work is this? But I would extend it maybe a little bit, because there's kind of a very layered complexity of relations that seem to be at play, from what we might call collaboration to community to solidarity to the guest relationship. I think was very present throughout the entire piece. At least felt like it, that you were uh, how you are articulating yourself in the process, and then friendship, maybe, and why do we have different words for all of those things, and kind of where does one start when the other ends, or do they ever end? And the way that your like piece moves back and forth between those registers of social relation through material process, I think is something worth addressing.
Cool. And thanks. Just want to say thank you for having me, having the film. It's my first time in Boulder. I've always been curious about what it's like here since reading a tweet in 2020 that said Boulder is like Wakanda for white people. So I'm just, exploring that as I'm here. But I also just want to, at the start, talk about a couple of people that aren't here. A few people, Mike Forsha, Tapejuta Wichapiwin, Douglas Ewer, Layla Awadala, the rest of the, ensemble family, a lot of different, again, words for it, that whose energies and spirits and are kind of entwined destinies. Like this film is something like a portrait of that fiber optic cable that Mike talks about that connects us. But there's also, just being here this week, being in the energy in the space of all the other filmmakers, and also just want to shout out Xiao Lu, since she actually shot part of the performance that gave rise to this film. So yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge all those people precisely because while it's very clear to me that in some ways, I claim authorship over the film in a very clear way because it's very much my responsibility. This is not, I never wanted Mike or Tapejuta, also goes by Erica, Mike or Erica, to feel like what we were presenting would like come back to them, like especially if it was problematic for someone. That's like, I made the editorial decisions here, right? But what I'm drawing from is this archive of relationship building from the moment that I first felt the kind of sonic vibration coming again out of my Twitter feed when I saw the video of folks dancing around the fallen Columbus statue. It was really that almost sonic transmission that it like implanted this light in my heart. And it took a long time to understand how to follow that into relation with all these folks. And obviously Mike, I mean, I think authorship is a really interesting question because like every time I would talk to Mike also about him being the kind of catalyst for the takedown, he would also defer that question and say that he was acting on the instructions of the creator, right? So what are we to do with that? I think the thing that I'm interested, at least in the cinematic version of this work, and you can probably get the sense that there were performance versions, there's an installation version, but in the cinematic version, I've worked for 2 years trying to build a language in montage and especially sound editing that could bring almost in like this Neanderthal like way, like the way that these voices echo through time and how we find each other in that time, and how radical acts of opening, like the takedown of the Columbus Monument, are a kind of call to leap through the open mouth of that relationality, right? And to find people that on the surface we often might feel almost uncomfortable to approach. Like, who am I to roll up to Minneapolis in 2021 with the amount of intensity and burnout and just, you know, who was I? I was constantly like, for me, as much as where am I from, it was also like, what right do I have to be here? And I think in engaging with those questions, I was always thinking about myself as a stranger, right? Like, I am a stranger who comes in, and in all the problematic and also potentially welcome aspects of that, like the question of hospitality was always at the forefront. Not only, I think, especially in the West, we think of hospitality often as like the thing you receive when you go to a new home. But actually, I think one of the biggest problems with our current societal condition is that we don't understand how to receive hospitality. And I was the recipient of hospitality of unhoused people, for example. And I had to learn how to receive that hospitality. And that's like a heart opening experience. And I think part of what I wanted out of the edit was then like, is there a wavelength? Is there a kind of tuning that's possible in image and sound to kind of open the heart in that way?
Nice. Questions from folks in the audience?
Thank you both so much for sharing. I have some ideas about this, but I'd love to hear you speak, Karthik, on the treatment of the forsythia and just its visual presence and meaning. It was exquisite.
Yeah, thanks. So this kind of cycle of works is called the Forsythia cycle. And I live in the Northeast, and like many places, Forsythia is the first shrub to bloom. So it was blooming during the uprising, you know. So while watching these images on social media, for example, the Third Precinct burning, I was also looking out my window and seeing these like really intense yellow flowers. And to me, there was something so organic, actually, and necessary about the way that this accumulated rage manifested in this kind of cleansing destruction, especially of that first night. And obviously, I was very far away from it. So the forsythia, and even the way that it grows in that kind of tangle and network, it became another one of these tuning devices where, like, how do I follow the energy that I'm feeling, like, through even the ground, the natural world. So it's become a symbol of that fire, but it's also a kind of symbol of the stranger. You know, it's not native to Turtle Island. It was brought in this kind of ornamental shrub craze in the 19th century. There are Asian and European variants, and I'm also interested in that question of how a stranger can arrive correctly, right? Especially as the takedown of the Columbus Monument and Columbus's arrival, I think, is the great catastrophe of the arrival of a stranger that founds the kind of epoch we're living in. And I think actually maybe we're in the death throes of. And if we're going to think about how to reorient like all this intense energy that has been unleashed on this land, I think going like finding symbols that can hold and I don't know, speak to that retranslation of energy. That's part of what I'm trying to do in the visual language of the film.
Could I ask specifically about the single flowers on the speaker?
Yeah.
And where that came about?
That was fun. And also, like, some of my friends that I met on residencies are here, Alex Kleeman and Dan Beachy-Quick. So I was at McDowell, and it was also April, so I had access to a lot of forsythia, and I had this little speaker with like a woofer, and I was playing with it and thinking about how sonic transmission can have a visual analog. So what you're seeing is the woofer respond to the original powwow drummer from the original takedown, Hokie Claremont, who joined the ensemble. So it's the actual beat that is being played through the speaker and causing the flower to dance to that beat once again. So you don't hear it, but you see it. And I think that question, right? Like, how do we animate movement? And also, how do we do it? I think, like, you know, we have access to the videos, right? You can go on YouTube, you can go on whatever, you can go on X. And you can find the original videos, right? So I was always thinking to myself, like, how can I actually describe how the energy that I first felt from all these experiences has moved through me? Like, that I am the conductor of this. And these were all experiments, like the basketball stuff and all this stuff is sort of ways that I could try to, conduct that energy, recycle it in ways that, like, I think in social media, you tend to have a decay. The energy spikes and can even animate action, but then it decays and it becomes like, this has been watched a billion times. Can we create images and sounds that actually might accumulate energy, especially as we kind of go in distance and time from those kind of events?
Thank you so much for this. It was so amazing to see it in a proper theater, sitting still and paying full attention. I think my question has to do with this last bit that you touched on, that we're used to consuming images in a disposable way, that they lose their potency over time. And I'm curious about how you thought of the relationship of the short viral image to the longer feature length thing. What kind of meaning did you want to build? How did you create accumulation instead of dispersal or diffusion?
I think sound was probably the most important aspect for me, because we always even say images, or we say video. Like, video even has, like, since it comes from the root to see, like, it has this bias towards the image. I was really interested in the sound of, like, viral videos. Like, there's a motif in the film that's like, you only see the image once. It's a kind of arc flash. And I wanted to also be real about, like, all the other, like, stuff that was coming up in my feed. Like, I would screen cap a lot of this stuff and keep it in folders. But that one in particular, for example, it was just this random person that witnessed and shot this arc flash with, like, terrible sound, like, really, like, pixelated imagery. But then working with Ernst Carroll to take that sound and to make it a kind of motif that, for me, I wanted to express, like, for example, I live near Boston, and the Columbus Monument in Boston was beheaded on the night of June 9th by anonymous, wonderful people who we have to thank still, but we don't know who they are. And to Mike, it was very important to take down the statue in the day. But, like, I was thinking about how, like, energy is actually transmitting through these networks in real time, right? Like, including the kind of energy transfer between, like, Erica recounts it, right? Where she is with Native folks in ceremony on Lake Street, but is drawn towards the Black Lives Matter protesters, right? And is feeling, almost for the first time in her homelands, for the first time, right? She grew up in South Dakota as displaced people. She's on her homelands, and she's, like, feeling the energy of, like, this insistence on Black life, right? So, like, for me, what was interesting about virality is, like, can we use things that are unexpected, like the sound, to get at these connections, you know, and to build that into, like, a motif.
Hi, my question's for Amy. I was just wondering if you could speak on the black and white portions of the film and how kind of those images are kind of quilted together, and the process behind that.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, so I mean, I was thinking, you know, this is a shorter project, and I've been spending, like, over 6 years working on this other feature that I've mentioned when Eric asked his question, and I really wanted to have, which is more of an essay-based, I guess I would say, like, experimental doc. And and wanted to really use this film, which started actually through Canyon Cinema's Print Generations Commission, which was about the centennial of 16 millimeter back in 2023, actually, to really think about the like tactility of film and the sort of possibilities that others have explored before me, around how, you know, one can push the celluloid image. And that I was really excited about, you know, different artists like Lynn Sachs, who use actually, it's unsplit 16, or it's regular 8 film that's like unsplit, so it's, you know, technically 16 millimeter, but it's 2 8 millimeter frames. Regular 8 film was, you know, not used too much, or definitely was, but Super 8 definitely kind of superseded that by the 60s. So as soon as I kind of had seen those images in others' films, I knew that like that was like a quilt block to me. And so wanted to kind of play with that. How can like a, you know, a frame be a quilt block? And so did these kind of tests and was making this quilt that I was filming myself making. So that's kind of like the technical response to you know what that is. It's just a Kodak Brownie film camera, which you can, you know, buy, I think, on eBay for like $25.
And I think we are out of time for this Q&A. Thank you, Amy, for joining us. Congratulations and good luck. Thank you, Karthik, so much.
Thank you. I wish I could be there. I hope you all have a good festival.